and the Senate are in session to try and resolve all these issues. Not a lot of time for them to do so, so they're really trying to, negotiations are going on at the highest level right now. One thing that I think members of Congress really learned from the last go-around with these budget debates back in October is they really don't want another government shutdown. So they really want to try and figure out something to avoid that, which would happen on January 15th if they still aren't able to agree upon something. But they really want to get something done before they leave town so they can enjoy their holidays and time with their families. So going on to the next slide, really, both Chairman Ryan and Murray have said, listen, there have been many attempts to try and get a huge, big budget deal. We're just not even going to go for that. Right now, we're just trying to get something small they're looking at for the rest of the 2014 fiscal year and the 2015 fiscal year. Just trying to do something for 2 years so that we don't have to have another kind of round of budget fights and cliffs, especially with the elections coming up. They want to kind of get something just done for the next couple of years. So what they're looking at is something for just the next 2 years that has a little bit of or some sequestration replacement. It wouldn't get rid of the entire sequester, but hopefully get some, at least be able to replace some of the sequester. And then looking to make sure it's evenly divided between defense and non-defense, and then also as for all the sequestration replacement. And then finally, making sure that we're really protecting that there is some sort of balance. Now, when we're talking about balance, in past webinars, we've said, listen, balance by including tax revenues and responsible spending cuts. But even some of that is just too much for them to really agree upon. So they're looking at whatever low-hanging fruit is left. And so that's kind of getting some revenues, but not through tax loopholes or raising any taxes. It's really through increasing fees like TSA fees and other things like that. And then also some other mandatory spending cuts on kind of a variety of smaller programs. So nothing that would really touch Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. No major changes on those programs. Also no major tax changes as well. So they're really kind of just narrowed the scope, trying to get away from the most controversial issues so that they can get stuff through. So that is kind of what we have heard so far, is what a sort of deal would morph into, what that's kind of shaping up to be. But going on to the next slide, one of the big questions is, even if Ryan and Murray are able to agree upon something, which they are hoping to do within the coming days, it still has to get through Congress. And as we all know, getting anything through this Congress is quite a challenge. And there have been, just today, news reports that some members of Congress are saying, listen, if even the increased fees, we're even opposed to that, and that really anything, we don't want to see any additional fees for sequestration replacement. We'd rather have sequestration stay in effect to have lower spending levels. So it's still going to be a challenge to try and get anything through this Congress. So that is something that we'll be keeping our eyes on. But moving on to the next slide, I think there really is a big threat that Congress will get so nervous, so scared that we are running up to the brink, or we're running up to the holidays, and they want so badly to get on those airplanes and get back home that they'll agree to anything that will kind of allow them to finish the deal, get home, and not have to worry about this. And so one of the things that we always worry about is what could slip through in that case, that we want to make sure that they don't leave out some those issues that to us are the most important and that really need to be lifted up. And we want to make sure that Congress is really making responsible decisions in these budget negotiations. So going to the next slide, what is our message? So we want to make sure that whatever deal forms, that Congress really does pass a responsible budget plan that replaces sequestration, even part of sequestration, with a balance of some revenues and spending cuts. Even if it is kind of more modest, certainly that is better than allowing, even more modest kind of combination of some spending cuts and some increased fees is better than sequestration with ongoing cuts to the WIC program and Head Start program and Meals on Wheels and that sort of stuff. So we want to make sure that at the very least those programs are protected. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're protecting defense and non-defense programs kind of at the same. We want to maintain that parity principle between defense and non-defense spending when it comes to sequestration. We want to make sure that even if this is a 1 or 2 year deal, that we still have the rest of sequestration remains in law for the coming years, and Congress needs an incentive and ensures that they come back to address that in future years. We want to make sure that, if Ryan and Murray come to a deal, that will be on the overall top line spending levels. And then appropriators have to decide how they're going to divvy up that pie and how much they're going to spend on WIC and how much they're going to spend on Head Start and how much they're going to spend on education and national parks and everything else. And so we want to make sure that then in that appropriations process that members of Congress are dividing up that pie properly and ensuring adequate funding for the programs that we care about that really address hunger and poverty. And then finally, we kind of want to make sure that, whatever comes out in the next month or so, and however Congress addresses these budget issues in the coming days and before the January 15th deal, that really is just a first step. That's a start, but at the end of the day, Congress still needs to address the budget issues that have and come up with a deal that's been eluding them for so long. That we really do need to pass a budget deal that brings in more revenue, that is balanced with appropriate spending cuts and additional revenue, and ensures that we're able to fund the programs that we care about over the long term. So that and replaces sequestration. So kind of that's our messaging, and with that, I will turn it over to Christine. I think one other thing that...
Well, before we go forward, Amelia, thank you so much for so succinctly summarizing the budget situation for us. I do want to encourage everyone who's listening in to feel free to ask questions online in the box in the sidebar. We will be answering those as we go through, and we'll save a few of the really pressing ones for the end to address. So is there something you wanted to add, Amelia?
I just want to mention, too, that anyone who is watching C-SPAN or the news may have seen the president made some remarks today about addressing poverty, and so, that's always a good thing when the president speaks out on some of these issues, too. So hopefully there will be a growing conversation about some of this stuff.
All right, now we turn it over to Christine, who will begin talking about the Farmville conference. So, Christine?
Great, thanks, thank you. So, like Amelia said, the president did just give a speech, and in talking about the Farm Bill here, today's kind of a big day for the Farm Bill as we get down to the wire in Farm Bill negotiations. Not only did the president give a speech, leaders in Congress are meeting about this issue today and are really hopeful that some kind of agreement can happen soon. But there's a number of things that we're concerned about in any kind of agreement, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'll just give a really brief rundown of what's been going on with the Farm Bill. If you've been following this, this is probably all sounding familiar. But of course, the Farm Bill is a huge bill with a lot of priorities, and I'm really just going to focus today on SNAP, or formerly food stamps, which is really what we think is the biggest threat right now. So if you remember, the Senate has passed a Farm Bill. It included about $4 billion in cuts to SNAP, which would impact about 450,000 households. Those households could lose about $90 a month in benefits if this goes into effect, which we were not happy to see that pass when it did. But then the House went on and passed their Farm Bill, and it was much, much worse. If you see the little picture there on the slide, this comes from Heritage, and this was really behind why a lot of cuts to not just nutrition programs, but also farm programs were being pushed. And so out of the House, we ended up getting two bills, one with farm programs and one with nutrition programs. But total between those bills, there was $39 billion in SNAP cuts. And this would have a devastating impact if these went into effect. Almost 4 million Americans would be taken off the program. A number of children would lose free school meals, and those SNAP benefits could be reduced for as many as 850,000 households. So it would be the cuts alone would be devastating. But it's not just the deep cuts that we're really concerned about. There are a lot of really harmful policy changes included that are being pushed by the House that we're really concerned about moving forward, specifically around work. And there's a couple pieces that you'll see on the slide here that have to do with work requirements. SNAP already has some pretty strict work requirements, especially if you're what is called an able-bodied adult without dependents. And what the House is pushing for is ending of waivers. So right now, if you are an able-bodied adult without dependents, you're subject to a 3-month to work requirements, which mean that you can only get SNAP for 3 months out of every 3 years. But in periods of high unemployment or in areas where there is a lack of sufficient jobs, then those work requirements are waived. And what the House is trying to do is remove those waivers. And it would have the impact of taking almost 2 million people off the program. And the thing to remember about these folks is that they have an average income of about $2,500 a year. You know, these people, some of them are veterans. You know, this is definitely would have a very harmful impact on the folks who need SNAP while they're looking for work and just can't find it because jobs aren't out there. But another harmful piece, policy change, is one that is, you know, called the Sutherland provision, and this is one that is even more drastic because it would allow states to cut SNAP benefits for most adults, including parents that have young children if they're not working for at least 20 hours a week. And the interesting part about this is that it doesn't provide work programs, it doesn't provide job training, and it financially incentivizes states to cut their SNAP rolls because as people are taken off the program, the states would get some money from the federal government for doing that. And so it could have devastating impacts across the country if it were to go into effect. So I have this little picture here that says return to work, and essentially this is what the House is trying to tell folks who are on SNAP that aren't working. They're saying go to work, but they're not really providing any kind of assistance in doing that. And you know, with the economy the way that it is, unfortunately, you know, folks are still having trouble finding work, and so that's why we're really concerned about these proposals. SNAP is working the way it's supposed to, and as the economy continues to recover, we expect people to be able to go back to work and cease to be eligible. So on top of all of that, this is all happening. This debate about SNAP is happening in the context of cuts that have already gone into effect. On November 1st, every single SNAP household saw their benefits reduced. It ranges, you know, different families lost different amounts of money, but every household has been impacted. The total cut over the next 3 years is about $11 billion. A family of 4 lost up to $36 a month, and we did a calculation at Birth of the World, and looking at the numbers, the cuts are equivalent to cutting about 10 million SNAP meals a day. So 10 million, that's a lot of missed meals that families are doing without because of the cuts that have already gone into effect. So what does this mean then? What happens now? As you see there, the current Farm Bill has expired for now. SNAP continues for now, and what we're really looking at is the conference committee. So the House and Senate have put together a conference committee to come to agreement. We expect that the leaders of that committee are meeting on a regular basis, and hopefully they're meeting today and want to come to an agreement, but they are very far apart. As you saw, between the House and Senate, there are some pretty big differences in nutrition. There's also some pretty big differences in some of the other pieces of the bill that are really contentious, and so there's a big question as to whether or not the conference committee is going to be able to come to agreement. And there's, it's still kind of unclear then how this is all going to sort itself out. We've heard rumors in the past that this could be tied into the budget negotiations that Amelia talked about. We haven't heard that in a while, but the Farm Bill is going to produce a big number of savings, and what those savings go to, is important if it ends up being especially some kind of budget deal in the future. And then the last thing on there is the possibility of an extension of current law, which no one really wants, but may end up being what we get if Congress can't come to some kind of agreement. And the big concern there is what will be cut to pay for that extension. And last year when we got an extension of farm law, it was SNAP Nutrition Education, that got a cut of about $100 to $110 million this year, and we really, really don't want to see that happen again. So we have quite a challenge before us, but I think that we continue to press on. Our message stays the same as it has been. We want Congress to oppose cuts to SNAP in any farm bill, and for the reasons that I've already outlined. All SNAP households have already seen their benefits cut. Families are already struggling. We don't want to make that worse. So that's really the important piece there. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Christine, for really driving home how much SNAP has already been damaged in this past year and how vulnerable it is as we head into the final negotiations in the Farm Bill. Now I turn it over to Tila, who will let you know about how you can become more involved and try and help influence both of these conferences. So Tila.
So I will try to offer insight into how we can consolidate the information that Amelia and Christine have shared with us. The time is now. I think Amelia said earlier, the decisions that Congress are making right now have long-term impacts, and we really need to lift up our voice and let Congress know that these are the issues that really matter to us. On December 10th, Pope Francis is calling on people around the world to pray to end hunger at noon local time. And he's calling us a prayer wave. He says, we can put our faith into practice by urging leaders of our nation to ensure that no one goes hungry. So there's another prime opportunity for us to get in contact with our members as well. Your senators are in the state until December 9th, and this would be a very good time to try and maybe do a drop-in visit at the local office or schedule a visit and see if you can actually meet with a member or a member of the member staff. If you're not going to do an in-person visit or drop into the office, there's a number of other ways you can take action as well. You can call, you can email, you can write a letter to the editor, and FCNL has resources and a toolkit that can help you write a letter to the editor and also help you figure out how to schedule a visit. And the slides from this webinar will be available afterwards, so you can just copy and paste these links into your browser and go from there. And like I mentioned earlier, you can also schedule a lobby visit. FCNL, and that, again, has another toolkit to help you with lobbying. I think another good way to reach out as well is to reach out to organizations in your community who might be working on these issues that we're working on. FCNL has a list of resources of local organizations who work on the issues, on budget issues in SNAP. And also just look for local events that your members are hosting and see if you can attend and ask questions. Also, I want to mention that on December 4th, there's a National Call-In Day. On December 4th, which is today, there's a National Call-In Day to protect SNAP. You can call the number 1-800-826-3688 and let your member know just what Christine was saying, that we need to protect SNAP from cuts in the Farm Bill. We understand we need to reduce the deficit, but increasing hunger is not the way to do it. So if you get a chance, it would be really easy right after this webinar just to pick up the phone and dial this number and call in. As well, I've compiled a list of the different email action alerts that the organizations who sit around our table have sent out to our networks. A number of organizations, different organizations in our coalition, have been encouraging our networks to do very similar things. So you can visit these links. Again, you can copy and paste them and put them in the browser and send an email to your member of Congress that way. And we've made this very easy to do. So I just want to end by saying that whether you call, email, or meet with your member staff in person, the message is really simple. Since many of the action alerts I mentioned on the other page and what you've heard earlier from our different organizations, we have a common message, and I've tried to consolidate that into what you can say. Don't cut SNAP or other vital programs that help people struggling to get by. Instead, we need to craft the budget in a way that reflects what our nation really needs, one that cares for the vulnerable among us and is grounded in the value of compassion shared across our faith traditions.
So thank you very much, Tila, for letting us know how we can get more involved and the importance of getting more involved in order to influence some of these final negotiations to make sure that the most vulnerable among us are protected. If we can, just for a second, we'll go back and highlight that phone number really quick, because that's a great way that you can get involved today. That's 1-800-826-3688 to get involved right now. So we do have some time now for some questions. I guess the first question that we have is for you, Amelia. Maybe you'll be the best one to answer this. You mentioned that there are grumblings of a deal in the last few days for the budget. Do you have any more details of what that deal might look like? You mentioned fees. What sorts of fees would those be?
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, there are a couple things that have been kind of touted in terms of fees, increased TSA fees, increased selling off wireless spectrum. So just some stuff like that, not really stuff that Bread for the World usually follows. There's some changes with the pension guarantee, pensions for federal workers, sort of thing. You know, nothing that would have dramatic consequences. I think the other one that I had heard was Postal Service, some changes with the Postal Service. So just sort of things that tend to be less controversial when we're talking about these budget issues. So those are some of the things that have been reported in that we've heard reports from. But we'll see. We'll be keeping our eyes out. We're hoping that a deal might be coming out within the next within the coming days. We know that that's what members of Congress who are engaged in these negotiations right now want to do is to have something coming out in the coming days. So once we see something, we will be all about it, kind of seeing what's proposed, but that's what we've heard so far.
And how likely do you think it is that we are going to see something, or do you think the football is just going to be punted?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm more optimistic than I was probably a few weeks ago, but we'll have to see. I think it'll be we'll have to see what reactions we start hearing from other members of Congress as some of these ideas are floated to get floated among the rest of the caucus in both parties to kind of see if they would have the support to pass this sort of thing. But I think no one wants a government shutdown again, and I think there are enough people who don't want sequester that hopefully they can garner enough political will to get something through.
Thank you, Amelia. I want to remind everyone who's listening in right now to feel free to submit your questions in the sidebar. We'll begin answering them as soon as we get them. Christine, one question that I have for you is, what is at stake if a farm bill is not passed at the end of the year? Because obviously, even beyond SNAP, there would be some other consequences.
Sure, it's a good question. Like I said, the Farm Bill did expire in September, and Congress does have some wiggle room before they absolutely have to pass a bill. But starting in January, the U.S. Department of Agriculture would have to start implementing some pretty outdated laws, particularly with our farm programs, that could have some pretty drastic consequences. I know last year what really spurred Congress to action was the scare of dairy prices increasing because of the lack of a dairy program, which would be devastating not only for all Americans that have to buy milk, but for also the WIC program, which would drastically increase the cost of the food package there. So, USDA does have some time. It will take them some time to put those outdated laws into effect, so the impact wouldn't be immediate on January 1st, but those are the kinds of things that we'll start to see happening because farm law has expired, and with the start of the new year, those programs, outdated law would have to be implemented.
And how likely do you think there is going to be a deal before the end of the year, Christine?
So whenever I find myself optimistic, things fall apart, and whenever I think that they're not going to happen, there seems to be a breakthrough. So I'm really not sure how I'm feeling at this point. I'm hopeful that they'll be able to come to some kind of agreement, whether if it's not before the end of the year, then certainly by early January. I think that the fact is they have to do something. They can't let the Farm Bill just kind of collapse and not go anywhere. So I'm cautiously hopeful that they will be able to get a deal done. Whether we'll see it this week or next or in early January, I really can't say.
Amelia, do you think there's any danger in if they do not come to a budget deal on the 13th of another government shutdown in January when the CR expires on January 15th?
We'll see. I believe that if Congress adjourns without a deal, I mean, you never know, but if Congress adjourns for the holidays without a deal, I think it is increasingly likely that we would see a straight continuing resolution. So they would just sort of extend everything for another period of time, potentially for the rest of the year. You never know, because this, as I said, like Christine said, this Congress is really hard to predict, and there have been moments where I have just been kind of floored, and everything I thought was happening totally went the opposite way, particularly in votes failing, particularly in the House. So you never know, but I do know that the blowback was so big from the last government shutdown that congressional leaders don't want to go through that again. No one wants to go through that again. And so my guess is if they can't come to any sort of budget deal, they'll just try and do a straight up continuing resolution, which would be really, I mean, it's been so long since we've had actual spending bills that where members of Congress really stop and think about how much they're going to spend on certain programs and what they're going to do. And so, I mean, that would be a real shame. And certainly having sequestration continue is just would be horrible. So, so I'm hopeful that they will come to an agreement. But I would be, I mean, right now I would place my bets on not seeing a government shutdown.
Well, we will certainly continue the hope for not seeing a government shutdown, and again, hope that we get some good budget deal that doesn't go for any of those other pratfalls that you sort of mentioned earlier. We want to remind everyone to participate in our National Call-In Day to Protect SNAP. You should see it on your screen right now. Again, please make sure that you call in today, 1-800-826-3688. And we want to thank you all for joining us for this webinar. You can find on this final slide all of our contact information in case you have any other questions or want more information about how you can get involved, or for more resources, you can visit all of our websites. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck in your work as we all continue to help make sure that these final negotiations go in a way that protects the vulnerable among us. So thanks.